Yes, it's fine. We can start now. Yeah, today we are going through the seven modules. That is Socratic dialogue. This module and this topic we are going to go through, I believe for me, it's the most important subjects, especially for those who would like to apply logotherapy to help other people in different settings. And it's titled Socratic Dialogue with a focus on hues of meaning, because Socratic dialogue has been used by different people, different professionals with a different philosophical orientation. But here it will be Socratic dialogue based on from logotherapy perspective. And taken in that sense, it's truly a technique which allows one to go through a kind of transformation. I hope that through this presentation, we will be able to argue for that, to say that actually Socratic dialogue with a focus on cues on meaning, it's truly a process of transformation in life. So to start off, we have discussed a number of issues before. One of them, which have come several times, is the existential vacuum, which Frankl suggests that for him, the existential vacuum in nowadays is with the current human being is due to the fact that, unlike animals, we don't have drives or instincts to tell us what we must do. And contrary to our ancestors, we do not have traditions or conventions or values which were transmitted to us to tell us what we should do. And he actually concludes this by saying that actually we don't even know what we basically wish to do. I thought this is a very important quote, just to reflect on for ourselves and for our clients. Are we aware of what we must do, what we should do, and are we aware of what we truly wish to do in our life? So the question I would like to ask, and everyone is more than welcome to share or reflect, is how are the different presentation? What are the different presentation of existential vacuum? We have talked a lot on existential vacuum, but how actually does it present in your own life or in the life of people you are working with or people you are living with? I thought that's an important question we should look at while we are reflecting on Socratic dialogue as a method used in logotherapy. So,
Kanda, sorry, can I just
yes,
ask,
go ahead.
with,
Go ahead.
with things like boredom or apathy or, disconnection from life, so just, complete disconnection from wanting to do anything, would that be symptoms?
Yes. You are asking if those different
How they present.
Yes, there could be presentation. There could be presentation of an existential vacuum. Yes, that's
Okay.
true. Yeah, that's
Perfect.
true.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And when you lose interest in something that you've been interested in and you've enjoyed, suddenly it no longer holds that interest for you anymore.
Yeah. That's true as well. The lack of interest. So yes, those are different ways how this existential vacuum may present. In my case, I thought I should share with you in a study I conducted some years back among people who were suffering from HIV and AIDS in rural area. I realized that, like the way Frankel said, that many of us have lost our traditions, but people as well living in an environment of violence, displacement, and poverty, there is a sense of loss of tradition, which for me, with my anthropology background, I thought one can call socio-cultural disorientation, so that people are in a state where they really do not know what values should they use to behave in life. How should they treat other people? They are totally at lost in terms of knowing which values do they have in their life and in their society. So I thought that was another way of how existential vacuum can present itself is actually the loss of values in our life. I thought we also shared this slide in the previous presentation, but it was mostly just to say when and how Socratic dialogue can be used in a situation of existential vacuum. With existential vacuum, one might be at loss of who he is or she is, not knowing who he is, having a problem with their personal identity and their values, self-worth as human beings. But they could also be struggling with just being aware of what is meaningful in their life and be lost to be hyper-intending focus on success and performance and knowledge, which takes them away from the calling of the moment. So I thought this was important to just reflect in terms of when we see people we want to help through logotherapy, where the crisis of meaning could be coming, which frustrates the will to meaning and can lead to existential vacuum. So the critical questions then we have in life in general, and which Socratic dialogue might help us, is to answer to the question as who are we or who am I? What are our values or my values? What is our calling or my calling? But logotherapy, you'd remember, clearly says we are first and foremost spiritual beings. So literally saying that if what separates us from animals and other things is our spiritual dimension. And as you know, there are characteristics or factors describing what is a spirituality in human being. But the question is not only who are we, but these questions actually about who are we and what shall we do about our life, where do we want to go, can become very critical in some moments in our life, so that one would ask, what shall we do, or what shall I do in case of death, the loss of a loved one, for example, in case of a diagnosis of a life-threatening or limiting conditions. These are situations I'm facing quite often because of the nature of the work I am having as a medical doctor. But it's important to say this question is critical not only when bad things happen, like death and illnesses. These questions are also critical when good things happen as well, like after a successful achievement. They have seen quite colleagues or many students go into a deep depression after they've completed their training or they've completed whatever course they were doing, brilliantly completed, but having a sense of void coming up. So I've seen as well people having promotion at work, but suffering from existential vacuum that one would spend years or months, energy wanting to achieve a particular position at work, and once they get that position, they are kind of lost of what next. So that's another space. So the Socratic dialogue then is not only about suffering and pain, but it's also about situation where people are not really in pain, but lost regardless of their achievement and success. But I thought as well that we should reflect about Socratic dialogue and even existential vacuum currently in our situation, now that we are also in an era of artificial intelligence. So with artificial intelligence, of course, there are people who are losing their job, their income, which is unfortunate. But artificial intelligence as well allow us to have more time, because some of the activities which would take hours and days can be done very quickly, so that we have time. And artificial intelligence puts at our fingertips knowledge that with the device, one has access to immense amount of knowledge. With that, it also allows us, for those who are fortunate and capable, they can use artificial intelligence to even make more money and have access to more power, if we can put it that way. So the question would be, what are we going to do with all this? What am I going to do with the time I have now, with the huge amount of knowledge, with the money I have? What are we going to do? So I feel that Socratic dialogue can be very critical in this era of artificial intelligence. So now, the Socratic dialogue with these questions of who are we and what's our calling, what shall we do, uses what we would call intuitive conscience. So that the quote I thought I should share here is from Fabry, who says, having lost most of his instinct directives, as Frankl mentioned it, and finding that reason have got little help, man must turn to the intuitive voice of his conscience. So this is what the Socratic dialogue would mobilize in when assisting one to find meaning in life. So about Socratic dialogue, it comes from Socrates, who it says that he believed that it is not the task of the teacher, that it was the task of the teacher not to pour information into the students, but rather to elicit from the students what they know intuitively. And Frankl said, or believed, that it is the task of the logotherapist not to tell the seekers what the meaning in their lives are, but rather to elicit the wisdom that is within the spirit of each speaker. I thought this was very important for us to understand the application of Socratic dialogue from a logotherapy perspective. So based on what we have just said, then, with the grabber suggested that one of the basic assumptions of logotherapy is that in the depth of our spiritual dimension, we know what kind of person we are. what our potentials are and what is important and meaningful to us. Irene, welcome and feel free to join us. You are more than welcome to ask questions anytime as well. So this assumption is so important for any logotherapist to remind ourselves that the people we are assisting or our fellow human being we are working with within themselves, within their spiritual dimension, they know who they are, they know their potentials, and they know what is meaningful. This is so important. I'll come back to it later. So as such, then, the aim of Socratic dialogue is to assist the client to find meaning in their life. And we do so by mobilizing one of the spiritual capability, which is intuitive knowledge. So the use of intuitive knowledge, this method, Socratic dialogue, would then facilitate what some would have called the third way of learning, which is transformational, which is a transformational process. You know, there are ways one can learn through experience, through doing things, or one can learn from what information one is being given or one has access by reading and so on. But there is this third way of knowing, which is the intuitive way of learning, discovering what we already know within ourselves. And this is a very, very important way of learning, which we need to consider when helping people who need to find meaning in face of existential vacuum. We do not need to teach them, prescribe them, and tell them what its meaning is. We do not need to push them in situation where they have to discover what meaning is. We need to listen to them for them to be able to be in a position where they can listen to their own conscious, that voice within themselves, which would direct them to what is meaningful in life. So as such, this method has got two steps, two important steps. The first one is to stop the usual and or automatic mode of living. We are generally living in an automatic mode where we perform things routinely as usual, as it has been told to us, as everyone has been doing things that almost days becomes similar to each other and there are no difference between each moment in our life. So with Socratic dialogue, we have to remember that we have to stop that way of living. So the stop, it's very important. And the moment we stop, we start listening to the call of the moment in our life. So listening to what? There are many things we can listen to. We have to direct our ear toward the voice of our conscious as an organ of meaning. It's only once we have picked up the voice of our conscious that we would pick up the calling addressed to us, the demand of the moment. It is in that moment then we are going to go into the second phase of this method, which is responding to the calling. So basically, it's not about just listening for the sake of listening. It's listening with the intention of truly and authentically responding to the call, to the demand of the moment. So as such, Socratic dialogue then relies on the healthy tension between what is and what ought to be, what the client is and what the client is called to become. So, because that's what life is, as we said it previously, life is a stream of changes. So we are always in a process of becoming. The question is becoming what? So the Socratic dialogue brings us to a stage where intuitively we are able to become aware of who we are now and what life is calling us to be. So it's to uncover this healthy tension, the therapist has to actively pick up the logo int in what the client says or presents. What the client says or presents, this is very important. So the therapist would actively pick up the logo int, and the logo int is presented as verbal or non-verbal indication of what is meaningful to the client, what's the value he or she holds in high esteem. So it is important. Logo ints are not only the verbal cues, but they can also be non-verbal cues that the client can present. From their posture, from the change of the tone of their voice, even from the way they present themselves, the color of their clothes, and other way the user might express him or herself. Said it previously, meaning is personal and unique. Then meaning cannot be imposed or given by the therapist to the client. So you remember the statement we made about Socrates and Franco to say one is not there as a teacher to pour information in the students, or Franco, as he said as well, to impose meaning or values on the client, but is to invite the client finding their own meaning and values in life. Because indeed, meaning is unique and personal. So by using Socratic dialogue, the therapist then has to become creative while using improvisation. This improvisation is based on the fact that each moment is unique and we have to listen truly to the calling of the moment. So the moment being unique, then we just have to be creative and be ready to come up a different way of engaging with the client. We can't use predetermined questions or predetermined procedure on a situation which we do not know how it would unfold. So this method then invites the therapist and the client to be present now for a future orientation, because we said it's about what is now to what ought to be. So there is that movement. So we need really to be in the moment and leave the uniqueness and the singularity of that unique moment in our life. So the creativity and improvisation allow an innovative and unique way of human interaction, which fits both the therapist and the client and the context of their encounter. So there are factors related to the therapist, factors related to the client, and factors related to the context within which the two meet. And those are in that moment, those are the ones directing us to what type of a way one should engage with his fellow human being to allow them find meaning in their life. It's very, very critical. That's then you'd understand why the question I asked from the beginning, that in your context, how does existential vacuum present? It is really very, very important, because then you have your own experience in your own environment, and you'll be able to respond to your own calling and own way of doing things. And that is actually a source of innovation in the way we interact with each other in life. So generally, Socratic dialogue would use open-ended questions which allow a continuous flow of the conversation. So Socratic dialogue does not use questions which other people have called, they are questions which stop conversation. There are questions when you have answered either by yes or no, it stops the conversation. There is no way of going further. Socratic dialogue uses different kind of questions which invite the client to get in that flow of conversing with his or her own life, where we believe that life is meaning is unconditional in each moment. So meaning that the client is always questioned, invited to respond to the calling in the moment. And generally, these questions are about what, how, when, who, and where. So these questions then should result into an insight at a spiritual level. Remember, we said we are making use of the intuitive knowledge. Very, very critical, the intuitive knowledge. So as such, Socratic dialogue avoid why questions, which often carries a judgmental tone, which might close and stop the conversation. It is important for us to avoid intellectual discussion. It's not about a philosophical discussion about life. It's about really responding in a practical way to what life is calling us. So Socratic dialogue would avoid debate, manipulation, and argumentation, but it would encourage a true experiential process which makes use of the spiritual dimension, as we had mentioned it previously. So then, Socratic dialogue is different from an interrogative or invasive questioning or inquiry, where the questions and the investigation are about serving the person who is asking questions. As a logotherapist, we are not in the session for our own sake. We are in the session for the sake of our client. And as such, then, whatever question we ask, it's not about our curiosity. It's not about what we want to know. It's about allowing the client finding or listening to their own voice, the voice of their conscious. So Socratic dialogue would use what's Fabry called guideposts to probe the different area where meaning is more likely to be found. So these guideposts would be self-discovery, areas or possibilities of choices where the client has to exercise freedom to make a choice, where the client has an opportunity to experience truly his or her uniqueness, where the client becomes aware of his or her own responsibility in life, and where the client is basically reaching out to other beings or other things in life and not being self-centered or directed to him or herself. So as we said, that Socratic dialogue facilitate a transformation in life. It becomes transformational learning because it allows us, or allow the client to find new or renew insight, worldview and values, attitude, behavior, and intention. So the outcome of a Socratic dialogue is actually a process, a situation where the client becomes clearly aware of some kind of insight which would change their attitude, some kind of their worldview and values in life, which would translate on attitude and behavior they have, and indeed their intention in life. So it is literally about one changing who is. So finally, I thought as outcome, I would like to suggest that because a meaning-oriented Socratic dialogue acknowledges the uniqueness and singularity of both the therapist, the client, and the context, this method, this Socratic dialogue, should allow a therapeutic and ethical techniques which we can use, which fit Socratic dialogue. And these techniques then should accommodate our vulnerabilities and strength of both the therapist and the client. So we are not there only to see what's wrong, what's bad, but we are there to see as well the capability of our client, their strength, while acknowledging the vulnerability they might be having. And that is very, very important, because then that's how one becomes truly authentic in acknowledging the bigger picture of what one is. So such technique would also allow the therapist and the client to face the unpredictability of life. As we said, each moment is unique and singular, so each moment would have a different calling, which means that we are always faced with what is unpredictable, what is uncertain. And that's how we would make use of intuitive knowledge to find what one is called to do in that particular practical moment in life. We don't come up with predetermined way of doing things. Otherwise, then we become automatic and fell into routine and responding to things as we always respond to. And in doing so, we miss the point. We miss the calling of the moment. And that is going to lead to a frustration of our will to meaning. And if it's continue, go into the neurotic triad of depression, anxiety, and aggression. And lastly, very important for me as well, such techniques would allow the therapist to provide a personalized interaction and intervention inspired by the true human encounter. We talked about the human encounter from the beginning of our course. It is very, very important that we realize Socratic dialogue is based on the true human encounter. We need to meet our fellow human being in their uniqueness where they are and allow them to listen to their own calling and not try to impose our own view and way of doing things. I thought these were some of the reflections or quotes I could share with you, just mostly for you to reflect and see how you find yourself, your way as a logotherapist because you would have to be you as a logotherapist, unique as you are, and in your uniqueness, how you are going to assist the people who will be coming your way for help. Yeah, I believe that was my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Kanda. I think that was, just incredibly useful. It was succinct and just really helped me to understand what Socratic dialogue, the value of it for the client, because, I've read about it and learned a little bit about it, but this sort of brings it to life. And what I found really useful is the what, how, when, and who questions. And one of the guideposts that you mentioned was choice and responsibility. And I think the questions what and how are the kinds of questions that evoke responsibility and choice in a client, better than when, who, and where. Especially that how question. So how can you move forward? And what about this, how much of the situation do you own? Are important. So that's something that's really landed with me. I had a client, well, I recorded a client session actually for one of my assignments recently. And my client was talking about the loss of her father and also the loss of her marriage and basically the life that she knew. And along with that, she felt she'd lost her family values and how she craved that and how it was so important for her children to experience families and values. And for me, that was such an obvious logo hint about meaning that was missing from her life and how her circumstances had meant that, values in her life were not, she didn't have a good example of that for her children, of what family really looked like. And so the session was really just, it came alive then when I actually just made her aware around, what I really can see and what I hear is somebody who has a very strong values base. And for me, that was just a logo hint. Maybe it was a logo red flag. I don't know, but it was just something that helped me in the session to say, to really listen very deeply to what it really was that was missing. It wasn't really the loss of her father. It wasn't really the loss of the marriage. It was more the loss of family and the values and the example that would mean for her children. So it just, by paying attention to that, I was able to change the course of the session, I think for the good. So yeah, just a recent experience that I thought I'd share.
No, thank you very much for sharing that. I thought Irene could come in as well with the questions, but something which you have just said, which might relate to, I think, I don't know if I've fully read what Irene have written, is the feeling you had. I don't know if you would relate it to a aha moment, what we call logo moment in a session. There's sometimes in a session, one experience that deep sense of insight, which open up. It's like a bulb which light up and makes everything clearer. And the person is totally different right there because the shift of the tone of the attitude is there. And that can happen with you as a therapist as well. But we are not looking for it in a session. What we want is to facilitate for the client to reach that stage of seeing things differently and critically picking up the values. As you said, the family values, it's probably something she knew, but because of the turmoil and the suffering and all the noises and so on, it gets lost in our focus. So now when it comes back, it's like someone is waking up to these values, which deep inside they know this is the most important. And that can really truly change the direction of the session. Yeah.
Yes. Spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes it a challenge for me as well in this situation where we feel that I can't bring you my own sessions because that is my own way of doing things in my own context with the kind of people I'm meeting. So that has happened to me in a very painful way, and we have to be very careful to cause what Frankl called iatrogenic damage. So he basically says, if you treat, I don't know if that's exactly what he said, but something like, if you treat two different people with the condition, you treat them the same way, there is a high chance that you'd have missed one of them or you have missed both of them.
Wow.
Because they are so unique. They might have the same condition, but they are so unique that you cannot truly treat them exactly the same way. So we need to always be in the moment to listen clearly and carefully to what is really important, what is of value for this specific human being who is in front of me. So I've made that mistake many times, that especially in a busy practice where you see client in and out. So you ask a beautiful question with this client, he or she answers brilliantly, and you feel that the person has found some sense and meaningful direction in their life, and you are like, the next client who comes with the same problem, I would ask and say the same thing. It just blows up that the person would tell you, you are not listening to me. Or you see, so it is very, very critical to personalize this process. It's very, very important. Otherwise, we will be imposing things on our client, and that comes with a price, especially for people who have been abused, people who are in a painful situation. It can make their suffering worse. Yeah. Irene, would you like to say something?
I've only got those two questions. How do we know that transformational learning has actually taken place in a client rather than just the client in that specific session had an insightful aha moment? It's one thing to have the aha moment, but it's another thing that the transformational learning actually took place. And that's ultimately what makes the change, is if the change is in a client for the long run, not just for that one session. And then my second question is also, if a Socratic dialogue is meant to be open, which it is, for the unpredictable, and we as therapists have to be spontaneous and have a balance, how do we still know that we on the right direction or goal within that session? What would your suggestions around that be for guidelines?
The two questions to me seems to be connected. We have to be very careful when we talk of transformation. Is whose transformation? Is the client transformation? Is not my transformation of what I see. As a doctor, I might be thinking, okay, with this aha moment, so my client should be able to go back and sleep should no more have sleep problem, or should no more have drinking problems. We have to be very, very careful. The transformation is about the transformation of the client. And sometimes that transformation could be just that insight, because that insight can carry the client through the different challenging moments, to the extent that even when the client comes back, we can still confront gently the person that if this is your aha moment, your insight, how is it helping you and living differently? I don't know if it's making sense. So the transformation should be the transformation from the client side. We have to be careful not to impose our own way of what we expect. Otherwise, we might put pressure on the client. And that transformation can be picked up in different ways, not only in what the client says, but in what they present non-verbally. So the second question, as I said, seems to be connected as well. We always have this difficulty or challenge to have already before the session our predetermined goals. Like if I have a client who comes to me for poor sleep, for example, that they've been struggling with poor sleep in their life. So as a doctor, I tell myself, whatever I'm going to do should result in good sleep for this person. I have to realize this is my therapeutic goal, but it might not be necessarily what the client might be going through. The client might also want to sleep, but you might not be able to sleep if life is calling you to something very, very important. I don't know if the example, it could be quite extreme. Basically is, yes, I have to have my goals of the outcome of my sessions, but I have to be aware these are my goals. Are they necessarily the goals of my client or what we have agreed? And even if it's what we have agreed, we also have to leave a room of what is unpredictable, what things might not work the way we all want them to work. So there is some sense of, if I might bring another challenge or dilemma, is some sense of surrendering, of letting things go. But it's not giving up. It's still persisting with listening to what life is calling us, but being prepared to something which might be different to what we are expecting. So basically, I am not saying you should not have goals. You should have your goals. And be careful to look at those goals. Are they meaning-oriented? And if possible, share those goals with the client to agree on. But knowing that life is still unpredictable, things might unfold differently. I've been in situation where I know the client, we have had session for maybe 2 or 3 sessions, and I've prepared myself based on whatever we have previously discussed. And I have my own questions, and sometimes even in the supervision discussion. Yeah, thank you for this question. This is why, even in my case, I don't know about you, this is why even in my supervision, when I supervise a student who's providing session to someone, or when I'm even in a supervision with colleagues, we supervise ourselves. For me, it's never about how my colleague or student is going to meet the client. I can never tell you, no, please go next time, ask this question, because this is important. I can suggest, but I cannot impose. Why? Because that moment is outside my control. So even in my own life as well, is that I cannot beforehand just stay rigid with the questions I have prepared to ask in the session, because when the client comes and sits, even non-verbally, they might just send you a signal to say, this is not a relevant question in this moment. Let's look at things differently. So the goals, yes, we need to have them, but we need to be careful to kind of put them at a distance and not be very much attached to the goal we want to achieve, even the goal the client wants to achieve. Otherwise, we would fall in what we are going to deal with in the next in the next module, hyper intention or hyper reflection. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was just thinking that an aha moment is just a moment in time that the client might say to you, oh my goodness, I never thought of that, you know, but now they're thinking about it. So it's not a miracle cure instantly. They go home and they think about it, and then they decide for themselves, what am I going to do with this new realization about myself or about the situation? And it's up to them to decide. So it is something as a therapist we can work on by asking, using Socratic dialogue to work on in future sessions. How's it going with your, with the direction you took in the last one, or the realization you had in the last session we had, and you let them talk about that, and you can work with them, but you can't tell them what to do with the new thought that they've got, and the new discovery about themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and Irene, I have to say the question you shared with us, they are truly relevant. They are very, very good question. One can use to have a session with a client to allow them uncover what is important in their life, like what am I living for, and what is this situation asking for me, and so on. These are critical questions, but the challenge is how will you even formulate them in a particular situation based on the kind of people you are working with. Remember, the logotherapy is also used with children, for example, and their colleague who would use art, drawing, music to open up a conversation. So the questions are very, very important. Sometimes there are people who would even, as we said, logo int can be non-verbal, that one can even have a dance session, for example, where we might not be talking much, but we just let people move around in a space where they express themselves in different way. So one just has to be more creative and open to the many possibilities how logo int can be picked up and allow a conversation where the client listen to their own voice, not the voice of the therapist, because that is another risk. Sometimes clients might be answering to our questions because they want to please us, or even they want to hurt us because they can see this is so important to you. Because it's so important to you, then I would give it to you to be in peace with you. Or then purposely, I'm not going to answer that way because I want to show you that you can't control me. Because we have to be careful not to get into a a mode where the client feel that he or she is being controlled. We need to create more an environment of, almost of surrendering, letting the person be and be with his or her own conscious and listen to it, and then they can tell us what they are listening to. Ours is to suggest. We can suggest. We can ask questions. And sometimes we do ask questions and the client does not want to answer those questions, or they are not ready. I've seen clients who tell me, Doctor, I'm not ready to ask that question. And one client actually told me in a very metaphoric way to say, Doctor, I'm not ready to get in that dark room. I'm not ready. So I won't answer that question. Then I'll say, so what would you like us to talk about? Where do you feel comfortable? If that dark room is so dark, so which room can we go to where you feel comfortable and you can tell me what makes you comfortable and so on. Then from there, you work slowly up until one day the client say, no, doctor, today I'm ready. Ask whatever question. I'm ready to get in. So we have to be very, very careful with questions we ask. So the question can be a good question, but the way it is asked, the context, the moment might not be the right moment. So all those are things we need to take into consideration. And this is why we are saying Socratic dialogue is based on make use of the uniqueness of the therapist, the uniqueness of the client, and the uniqueness of the moment. Thank you.
So Kanda, I think one of the things that stands out for me is, I suppose it's from our own coaching training, is really around meeting your client where they're at. And I think that's in the essence what you're saying is that sometimes your client presents in a really dark place and they just need that safe space to talk about it and to make sense of it. And for us as, I suppose, as logotherapists to start asking very, very challenging questions in that moment would be too overwhelming for the client. So there's such a level of, I think, discernment and really an appreciation of where your client is first, that real understanding of what would be appropriate now. And asking the right question at the right time has more of a profound impact than rushing to that. That's been my experience. Sometimes it only emerges in session 4 with that client. It takes a long time to get there, but that process in itself is really important.
Thank you for saying that. And I think Irene have written something so beautiful. I have to struggle to follow and what she have written. It's so important. This one need to be read for all of us. So would it be fair to say that Socratic dialogue is a kind of guided free flow conversation where we stay present, follow the client cues, and allow the next question to emerge naturally rather than working through a fixed list? Yes.
Exactly.
So you have put it, Irene have said it so beautifully. That's what it is. That's what it is. Very painful process for many of us. Even today, I still make a mistake because I would talk for myself as a doctor. Mostly it's in that context. I have to see a client. I have already a preset questions. But sometimes those preset questions can just be redundant and upsetting for the client. Yeah. It's important to stop, let the client come in, greet the person, meet the person where they are, and take it from there. But if I just, I'm in a hurry, I have to finish on time, I have only 15 minutes or 45 minutes for assessment. So the person has to answer this question. The person would feel rushed. If they are bold enough, they would tell you. If they are not, they would keep quiet and would be lost. So what Irene have written here is so important. Actually, the question we ask emerged in that environment. They come to us. This is why we have to use our own conscience to pick up what should we ask in this moment? How do we ask that? And even this is why I think there is a difference between the method, Socratic method, but we can use different techniques which are based on Socratic method. It could be pen and paper, give the client, or it could be allowing the person to move or sit arrangement. There are many possibilities. There's so much ways of allowing the person to get in tune to their own voice. And that issue of stopping, I find it very, very important, because we quite often rush in what we are doing because we are confident. I know my job, I know how to do things, and so on. And then we easily get into a routine, automatic way of doing things. And unfortunately, in the process, we lose our fellow human being. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Kanda.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you. And I just wanted to say, next month, because we had agreed to be meeting every month, but next month, unfortunately, the second week, I will be in Cape Town and Johannesburg attending a conference that week of the 14th. So, and I believe we are left with 3 modules. I thought I was going to suggest if we can skip September and meet again in October for the next session, which I believe would be about de-reflection, which is another logotherapy method I would like us to go through. So I really would like to ask that we don't meet. Yeah.
That's fine.
But meanwhile, you are more than welcome to send or ask questions. I'll be more than happy to engage on that. But thank you for being present and for your questions. As I said, it's not about me knowing more than anyone else, but it's just creating an environment where we can find our own uniqueness in the type of therapist we are called to be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.